Wait until you hear the moment Robyn accidentally tells the truth she's been hiding for years. In the ever-expanding anthology of Brown family contradictions, Robyn unveiled a particularly revealing linguistic slip: the strategic distinction between our kids and your kids. While strolling through the woods with Kody, she lamented the need for enough space for their children, only to pivot, within the very next breath, to the hypothetical scenario in which his other children might someday decide to come around. The phrasing was repeated more than once, a consistency that left little room for misinterpretation. One might almost admire the efficiency with which an entire branch of the family was rhetorically evicted. And the next part shows just how far that eviction really goes. This sudden distancing stands in amusing contrast to the ongoing sermon about the big united family, supposedly destined to thrive together on Coyote Pass. It is difficult to champion familial unity while linguistically disowning several members of it. The cognitive dissonance alone deserves an acreage of its own. There was also the unmistakable eye movement, an almost imperceptible roll, when Kody suggested that Truly might visit if provided her own room. Robyn's words expressed agreement, but her expression told a far more candid story. Especially ironic, considering the effortless allocation of an entire room for a doll collection, while an actual child struggled to warrant comparable accommodation. What happens next puts the entire family unity act into perspective. Of course, this is hardly new territory. The saga repeats itself with the familiarity of syndicated reruns, a grand performance of reluctance toward whatever plan Kody is currently pushing, all while using that supposed resistance as leverage to secure precisely what she wants. The 6-bedroom rental in Flagstaff remains a masterclass in the tactic. This time, the performance conveniently aligns with the pursuit of a larger home, one that, notably, does not prioritize hosting Truly. Yet, despite the conspicuous lack of interest in the other children, Robyn clings stubbornly to Coyote Pass, unwilling to sell or pay out the other wives. The dream must be preserved, if only until everyone else surrenders to exhaustion. A Freudian slip indeed, and an uncomfortably transparent one. But the real shift becomes obvious when the tears finally stop. Notably, her personality has undergone a remarkable evolution since the plural marriage disintegrated. The once constant tears have dried up, and the performative concern for Kody's older children seems to have evaporated with them. What remains is a clearer view of the dynamic that existed all along. A woman who has repeatedly distanced herself from the broader family while publicly lamenting her own children's supposed exclusion. The mask didn't just slip. It fell off, rolled down the hill, and lodged itself somewhere beneath a pile of discarded chainsaws Kody insists on brandishing in every conceivable setting. And by the end, the picture is unmistakable. In short, the episode served as a definitive reminder. Selective motherhood is still motherhood, but only in the most self-serving sense. The rest of the family, it seems, is welcome to visit, provided they don't expect to be claimed.
What if the biggest revelation of season 17 wasn't Christine leaving, but Robyn accidentally confessing far more than she meant to? Robyn Brown has a habit of revealing far more than intended, and season 17 offered a particularly unfiltered moment. While publicly lamenting Christine's divorce mechanics, she invoked a conveniently obscure doctrinal technicality. According to her understanding, a woman is not truly divorced until she becomes physical with another man. This was delivered boldly, right up until the instant she realized she had said the quiet part out loud. The backpedal that followed functioned less as clarification than as an accidental confession. The logic was unmistakable. This is precisely the sort of elastic spiritual loophole that would justify a premarital relationship she and Kody had every incentive to fast-track. But the real story begins when the excuses get louder than the truth. The timing, the secrecy, the weekend pilgrimages, Kody driving hours every week to her hometown, daughters in tow. was never the behavior of a man adhering to the pious restraint he so theatrically advertised. The question of where everyone slept during these excursions has always had an obvious answer. The official story insisted on chaste slumber arrangements, the kind that require blind faith and perhaps a mild concussion to accept. The original 3 wives dutifully participated in the shared religious narrative. Robyn, however, arrived with the side piece blueprint already in hand, and Kody embraced it as yet another stage for his expansive narcissism. And just when the righteousness reaches its peak, the hypocrisy walks through the door wearing a microphone. Robyn's moral grandstanding would be impressive if it weren't so chronically self-incriminating. She demands that others keep her relationship out of their mouths, yet was perfectly comfortable interrogating Christine about why she no longer provided Kody with massages. Her expertise in marriage, she suggests, is profound enough, apparently, to require the collaboration of her small children. When one of them chirped, "Go on more dates," to Christine on the eve of her departure, it revealed what the adults actually discuss when the cameras aren't rolling. The lack of correction from either Kody or Robyn spoke volumes. Christine, who had endured a quarter-century of canceled dates and broken promises, was left to manage the emotional fallout. Again, because the adults responsible for it elected not to bother. And then comes the part that truly exposes who everyone is when the cameras look away. What remains striking is Christine's composure. She responded gently to the child, shielding her from adult failures she did not create. It was a stark contrast to Kody's insistence that he would never, under any circumstances, sleep on a couch to repair his marriage. The outrage was almost comedic, coming from a man who had spent years driving long distances to visit a girlfriend he insisted he was totally chaste with, despite behaving like a teenager, claiming to have merely studied in the back seat of a car. And if all of this seems unbelievable, the final irony ties the entire saga together. The mythology of spiritual necessity, this notion that consummation was required to free Robyn from her previous marriage, collapses under scrutiny. Her first marriage was monogamous. No ritualized infidelity was needed to dissolve it. The far simpler truth is that she wanted the relationship with Kody and pursued it with an enthusiasm unburdened by the moral decorum she now demands from others. The Victoria's Secret pajamas were not symbolic of liberation. They were simply pajamas, selected for a man who rarely declines attention when it flatters him, because in the end, every facade cracks, especially the ones built on moral superiority. Kody and Robyn constructed a sanctimonious facade, but the cracks have always been visible. Their indignation toward Christine's autonomy is not rooted in doctrine. It is rooted in the discomfort of watching someone walk away from a system they relied upon to elevate themselves. The irony is that Christine left with her dignity intact, something the self-appointed moral authorities of the family never quite managed to preserve.
The story everyone thought they understood is about to fall apart. There is a growing fascination with Christine Brown's unexpected transformation from long-suffering heroine to something far more complicated. Viewers who once saw an endlessly patient martyr are discovering a character whose victimhood narrative comes with fine print and occasionally an asterisk the size of Flagstaff. And just when the halo starts to shine, the cracks begin to glow brighter than the gold. The emerging critique is simple. Christine may not be the selfless maternal saint she is often framed to be. Her indignation over adult children relocating, combined with her own philosophy that 18 is the official eviction date from the family home, creates a symmetry she would likely prefer to ignore. Even her daughter has noted the irony, an irony Christine herself seems blissfully unwilling to confront. The moral high ground, it appears, has a few loose stones. Watch closely. This is where the narrative flips on its head. Revisiting earlier episodes only sharpens the contrast. The woman now presented as the emotionally attuned truth-teller once cheerfully endorsed the "leave the nest on your birthday" doctrine with a rigor usually reserved for bank loan deadlines.
The show's recent Lost Dog interlude, staged with all the subtlety of a network holiday special, has only amplified the sense that the audience is being nudged, hard, towards sentimentality. Because the moment sympathy feels guaranteed, the storyline pulls the rug out again. None of this makes Christine uniquely flawed. Every adult in this sprawling domestic experiment has displayed the kind of imperfections that would mortify any ordinary person, had their missteps been cataloged across 20 seasons of national broadcast. These are not carefully engineered protagonists built to be universally adored. They are people whose character defects are not just visible, but archived. But here comes the part that viewers rarely admit. They enjoy the mess just as much as the moralizing. Still, certain Christine moments remain difficult to excuse. Her handling of major disclosures, from Truly's introduction to the family's breakup to the children's abrupt briefing on a new romantic partner, landed with a bluntness bordering on indifference. The message to her kids seemed less, "This will be hard and I'm here for you," and more, "Adjust accordingly." And the more the contradictions pile up, the harder they are to politely overlook. Yet complexity is not a crime. Christine can occupy two truths simultaneously: a victim of a damaging marital and religious system, and a participant in that same system's less compassionate practices. Admiration for her courage does not require overlooking her contradictions, nor pretending they do not shape the emotional blowback her family now navigates. Because, in the end, the most uncomfortable truth is also the most relatable one. Christine is imperfect. Spectacularly, inconsistently, sometimes frustratingly imperfect. And unlike most people, her humanity is preserved on film, edited for narrative effect, and replayed endlessly for an audience eager to decide who deserves sympathy and who deserves scrutiny. Christine, astonishingly, qualifies for both. What if the unlikeliest friendship in this family was the only authentic one left? The great irony of the Brown family saga is that the two wives once cast as sworn adversaries, Mary and Janelle, are now the ones demonstrating the only functional adult rapport left in the wreckage. After years of frosty coexistence, their recent ease with one another feels almost radical. Calm conversations, dry humor, and a mutual respect, conspicuously absent during the long era when both were conscripted into competing for the affections of the same man. Remove the artificial pressure of plural marriage, and suddenly the outlines of an actual, sustainable friendship appear. But here's the plot twist no one expected. The closest duo may never have been close at all. This emerging détente is all the more striking given the increasingly visible fractures between Janelle and Christine. For years, viewers were assured that these two were the inseparable allies of the original trio. Yet the facade is slipping. The longer they operate outside the forced unity of the family structure, the clearer it becomes that their personalities were never built for lifelong camaraderie. Their bond largely depended on raising children side by side. Now that the children are grown, the seams are unmistakable. Janelle's patience, once expansive, appears to be wearing thin, while Christine continues to unveil a version of herself that suggests more self-interest than maternal grace. And while everyone was busy villainizing Mary, she quietly became the only grown-up in the room. Mary's own evolution has been hiding in plain sight. After years of being branded unsafe by her own household, an accusation inflated beyond recognition, she's done the unglamorous, untelevised work of personal accountability. She is direct, yes, but directness only feels dangerous to people conditioned to avoid conflict. The truth is far simpler. Mary remains one of the few adults in this story capable of showing up for others when it actually matters. She traveled across states to share a meal with Janelle, extended support in the wake of family tragedy, and continues to regard the children with genuine care. If any of them reached out, she would almost certainly reciprocate with sincerity. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Most of these women would have gotten along just fine, if only they hadn't shared a husband. It is almost comical to imagine how different these relationships might have been had the women met under normal circumstances. As sisters-in-law, neighbors, or church acquaintances, Mary and Janelle would likely have forged a pragmatic, good-humored connection. Mary and Christine might have maintained a cordial, functional friendship. Christine and Janelle, on the other hand, would never have made it past polite small talk. The personality mismatch is too substantial. Even Robyn, perpetually eager for emotional closeness but comfortable only with surface-level bonding, might have clicked with Christine in some alternate universe where they weren't jockeying for the same husband. Without the competitive pressure cooker of plural marriage, many of these hypothetical friendships might have been merely adequate rather than catastrophic. Because at the core of it all lies a truth the show never wanted to admit. The experiment was doomed from the start. Expecting multiple adults to share a household, a spouse, and a never-ending supply of emotional composure is an exercise in structured chaos. It is difficult enough for two people to communicate effectively. Attempting it in an environment where one can literally hear another woman sharing a bed with the supposed common partner borders on absurd. And now, with the dust settling, something surprisingly healthy is forming from the rubble. Mary and Janelle find themselves in similar life stages, both divorced from Kody, both building futures that do not orbit around him. Unlike Christine, neither has rushed into a new relationship. Janelle has her grandchildren and her farm. Mary has her business ventures and an itinerary seemingly designed to reacquaint herself with joy. Collaborating on Coyote Pass and navigating the final spiritual detachment from Kody has nudged them closer together, not through forced unity, but through mutual competence and a late-in-life recognition that they can, in fact, rely on each other. And here's the final surprise. In a family built on artificial harmony, the only genuine friendship might be the one no one ever saw coming. Will they become inseparable confidants? Almost certainly not. But their slow, steady formation of a healthy, functional bond stands out as one of the few genuinely hopeful developments in a saga otherwise defined by fractured alliances and performative affection. In a family built on the illusion of unity, these two, ironically the least compatible on paper, may be the only ones demonstrating what actual, grounded friendship looks like. What happens when a reality show power duo finally outsmarts themselves? The latest manufactured cliffhanger from Kody and Robyn Brown, this breathless, will we or won't we add another wife routine, arrives with all the sincerity of a discount infomercial. The pair appears determined to keep the TLC cash register ringing, and apparently nothing says longevity like recycling storylines that expired years ago. The real question is how far this duo will eventually go to keep the spectacle alive. Their threshold for self-inflicted embarrassment has never been particularly high. And here's where their plan starts to unravel in the most delicious way. It requires no stretch of the imagination to envision Robyn authorizing Kody to trot off on a camera-ready date with a conveniently sourced potential wife. The two would enter the charade with a mutual understanding that nothing real would come from it. The woman in question would merely be another prop in their never-ending performance. Yet, this is where the plan risks turning comically poetic. Even if Kody marched into the setup declaring unwavering devotion to monogamy, simply reheating the motions of courtship could pry open a long-sealed window in his mind. Because once Kody gets attention, everything tends to go off script. A man built almost entirely out of ego, and whatever else he's pumping into that frame, rarely resists the lure of admiration. The fiction itself could reignite his appetite for the polygamist carousel, and what a fitting twist that would be. Robyn, so determined to preserve her status as the franchise's gravitational center, lighting a spark she cannot control. The pursuit of airtime has a way of leaving scorch marks, especially for someone whose greatest fear is being out-Robyned. And here's where it all gets even more ironic. Any volunteer who steps into this contrived circus today would clearly be signing up for a television opportunity, not a family. Kody's expectation that newcomers adore and defer to Robyn, the very dynamic that repelled everyone before, would repel them again. Should a younger, more camera-ready recruit appear,
The notion that Kody wouldn't redirect his attention accordingly requires extraordinary optimism. And then comes the final, perfect punchline. Robyn's insistence on guarantees only reinforces the theatrical nature of the entire idea. The likeliest arrangement would be a behind-the-scenes pact, ensuring the union remain a strictly non-consummated, contractually contained storyline. Performance art masquerading as plural marriage. In other words, a perfect metaphor for what the Kody and Robyn era has become. An elaborate pantomime, desperate for relevance, and perpetually on the brink of outwitting itself. If you think you've seen delusion on television before, just wait. This one deserves its own exhibit. Mary's recent declaration that she is generally hilarious arrives with all the subtlety of a foghorn, and about as much accuracy. Most adults possess at least a passing awareness of whether they are, in fact, funny. Mary, however, seems convinced that relentless self-amusement qualifies as comedic talent. She laughs after nearly every sentence she utters, an indulgent little habit that appears to be less about humor and more about validating herself in real time. It is not charming. It is not endearing. It is simply exhausting. And just when you think the irony is peaked, she somehow manages to outdo herself. Adding to the contradiction, she insists she dislikes dumb jokes, which would be news to anyone who has witnessed the non-stop stream of dim one-liners exchanged with Jen. The duo treats each other's jokes with the same breathless delight typically reserved for an enamored teenager, hanging on every word of a crush. One can practically hear the studio walls groaning as yet another self-satisfied cackle ricochets across the room. Jen, to her credit, occasionally produces a line that lands. The Bob with two O's moment, for example, managed to be genuinely funny, but Mary's laughter, particularly at her own remarks, rarely signals actual humor. It reads instead as a coping mechanism, the kind of forced levity someone deploys when they desperately want to appear breezy and unbothered. But here's the twist. Her humor problem isn't even the most baffling part of her persona. The attempt to reinvent herself as an edgy comedian seems rooted in her long-standing emotional repression. Years spent stifling self-expression appear to have distorted her sense of what humor actually entails. It resembles a child discovering crayons for the first time and immediately announcing a new career as a professional artist. The enthusiasm is evident. The skill set is not. Beyond the failed comedic persona lies a pattern of awkwardness, irritability, and thinly veiled superiority. She snaps at people she barely knows, judges them instantly, and behaves as though she occupies a higher rung than anyone around her, all while they extend politeness and openness toward her. The disconnect between her self-perception and her behavior is striking. And just when you hope she might wake up to reality, she doubles down instead. When she first proclaimed her own hilarity, it was tempting to assume she was joking. Unfortunately, she was not. At best, she possesses a sense of humor. At no point does it rise to the level of hilarious. The gulf between her confidence and reality is wide enough to drive an entire production crew through. In short, Mary's comedic brand is less punchline and more puzzle, chiefly because no one can figure out what, exactly, is supposed to be funny. What you're about to hear will make you question whether this family is raising children or polishing collectibles. Because the more you look at it, the stranger it gets. There is coddling, and then there is whatever performance art Kody and Robyn have decided to stage in the name of parenting. Their preferred method appears to be a kind of curated helplessness, the sort that would be endearing in a toddler but becomes downright unsettling when applied to a teenager on the brink of driver's education. Take the spectacle of a nearly 15-year-old having his hair brushed by a parent on camera. Nothing builds confidence like being groomed on national television as though preparing for preschool circle time. Add to that the gentle reminder to try not to spill the vitamins, as though the child in question hasn't mastered the fine motor skills required to hold a bottle. Evidently,
Independence is a privilege reserved for earlier seasons and other women's children. And just when you think it can't get more absurd, it does. And then there's the breathless reporting. Yes, reporting on where the boy stores his phone. The device itself isn't the point. It's the scandalous revelation that a teenager dares to place an object in a pocket. At this rate, graduating to tying one's own shoes may require a notarized permission slip. The contrast with the family's older children is impossible to ignore. There was a time when teenagers were effectively running a small household, one managing 6 younger siblings at 16, another tucking children into bed before reaching double digits. Yet now, adulthood begins at 20 with an eviction notice during a pandemic, while adolescence at 15 comes with parental hair brushing and waffles cut into neat little pieces. And the pattern points to something far more intentional than simple over-parenting. Apparently, independence is only character building when it applies to someone else's offspring. This selective softness seems less accidental than strategic. The cultivated dependence ensures that Robyn remains an indispensable hub in the family wheel, even as other children were once expected to function as unpaid junior parents. Her own teenagers are shielded from such responsibilities, not even allowed to explore other churches without her approval and physical accompaniment. The message is clear. Autonomy is a threat, not a goal. The more you examine it, the more the entire system starts to look engineered. The result is a portrait of teenagers presented, whether intentionally or not, as much younger than their years. Were their actual ages not stated, one might mistake them for elementary-age children based on the scenes alone. And while the hope lingers that some of this is exaggerated for cameras, the pattern suggests otherwise. Unfortunately, this brand of over-management is not unique. Many adolescents are entering the world ill-equipped for basic independence, but few have the misfortune of doing so while being televised as exhibits in a long-running experiment on the consequences of infantilization. Because in this household, helplessness isn't a side effect, it's the mission statement. In this household, learned helplessness isn't a problem, it's the plan. Subscribe for more.